Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. So in this episode today, Jack Delosa and I actually went through his tribulations and challenges inside of his business over the last 20 years. Particularly something I know you're going to really enjoy is listening to and hearing how he actually navigated through a process in 2016 where he had to lay off over 50 staff. He accrued over $5 million worth of debt. And then he went on to actually become one of the most profitable education providers in his space in the remaining 3 years post that situation. You're going to learn so much in terms of the staging and sequencing of solving problems for your business relative to where you are right now. Please enjoy. Jack, welcome.
Good to be here, mate. Thanks for having me.
Here. Yeah. It's funny, we were talking before about the first interaction 4 years ago. I think it was almost five years ago now. And it's funny, I was joking around with the crystal ball that you had. So for people that maybe haven't listened to our first episode, please go back and have a listen to it. I had Jack on the podcast previously, and I described the situation that I was having in the business at that exact moment. Hypothetically speaking, Jack, what would you say to a founder who's like just recently launched a company and gone from zero to, I think it was like $1 million in sales in 6 months? And you sat there and you were like, well, you're going to have this problem and this problem and this problem. And I start like sweating profusely. And I was like, yeah, lucky that's not me then. And then kind of proceeded to actually experience like those problems plus a whole bunch more problems in the business over the coming years.
It wasn't a comprehensive list.
No. So tell us a little bit about what you do, how you're able to cast the crystal ball into businesses and be so accurate.
Well, I mean, I've been in business now for 20 years, and so I've been investing and advising businesses for about 17 or 18 years, and then I started The Entourage in 2010, and so I see inside of thousands of businesses every year. And so fundamentally, the conversation we were having back in 2020, the good news and the positives that I hope founders and perhaps you took from the conversation back then is that in business there are patterns.
Yeah.
And when you get to 300K a year, you're going to face certain challenges. When you get to $1 million run rate, you're going to face certain challenges. When you get to $10 million run rate, you're going to face certain challenges. When you get to $50 million run rate, you're going to face certain challenges. And so one of the really important lessons that I think people can take from that last piece of our last conversation is that what we do as business owners, particularly if we're operating in isolation, is we sit around and we look at all the problems we're facing and we think, what's wrong with me? Why am I so unintelligent? And then we open Instagram and everyone's making $1 million every 10 seconds while they sleep. And we're seeing everybody else's highlights and everything looks rosy. And we go into this kind of shame cycle and spiral around, well, why aren't I able to be as successful as everybody else? Look, all business is growing from constraint to constraint. That's all you're ever doing. And so to put that in practical terms, when you start out, the constraint is I don't have a product or a service. And then you serve ecom businesses. And so from an ecom business, you either develop or invent a product, or you go and you source a product and bring it together. And then the constraint becomes, I've got a website, I've got the product, but I'm not getting any traffic. And so you then start to invest in traffic, whether through organic content or through ads. You then start to get the traffic, and the next constraint becomes I'm now getting the traffic, but my conversions to my product pages could be higher. And so that becomes the constraint. You want to spend 3, 6, 9 months unlocking that constraint. Got it. And then you've got your marketing and you've got your conversions dialed in and you've got your product. And now you're marketing and selling well enough and converting well enough that your product delivery and product quality probably isn't scaling at the rate that you would like to. And so you've kind of got this growing base of unhappy customers, and you're probably starting to attract negative reviews. And so at that point, the constraint becomes, how do I scale our product procurement and delivery in a way that sustains the quality that I want the brand to be known for? And then you solve that constraint over 6 months. And then the constraint becomes, well, we're marketing, we're selling, we're delivering. Everything is reliant on me, and I'm bursting at the seams, and I'm starting to burn out. At that point, the constraint is there's not enough leadership or managerial capacity inside of the organization, and you either need to start promoting and training and developing executives inside of the business, or probably better, recruiting executives from outside of the business. And so all we're ever doing is growing from constraint to constraint. And so if you view every constraint and every problem as a what's wrong with me, then it's going to be a really tough journey emotionally.
Got it. Sounds like you've said that a few times before. That process of like this constraint to this constraint and this constraint.
Well, it's universal.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I'm really passionate about and we're really passionate about at The Entourage is Man, there's a lot of business owners operating right now, even people that follow you, that follow me, that might not be in our programs and might not have proximity to us. Yeah. And they're listening to this right now, and their number one prominent thought before they turned on this podcast, they slept through last night and woke up with this morning is, what the fuck is wrong with me? Should I quit? You might have been there in 2020. I know you were there in 2022. Oh, yeah. And so it's a conversation that we need to have more of.
And so why do you think people don't have enough of it?
I think it's a couple of things. So the first thing is broadly, and this goes beyond entrepreneurship, but we've built a culture where we expect to feel good all the time. We expect everything to be easy. We expect to be able to acquire any skill or goal within 10 minutes without putting in any effort. And so from an expectations perspective, there's nothing wrong with you. There probably is something wrong with the naive expectations that you're bringing to your current scenario. And so the first thing that prevents us from having the conversation is a lot of people aren't even aware of this fundamental truth that we're talking about right now, which is it is hard and it's hard for everybody and it's supposed to be hard and that's the game. And so it's not about seeking easy, it's about rewiring your relationship with hard. The number one reason people don't achieve their goals is because they avoid hard. Yeah. Right?
And I think it's like, I was, just to touch on that 2022 time for me, like where I was like on the brink of complete like destruction, failure, like I can't continue anymore. And I think like reflecting back on that now, like I just greatly underestimated how bad I was. Genuinely, I'm like, dude, like you are orders of magnitude worse than what you actually thought you are. It's like you are so bad, and you need to work so much harder for so much longer to even get a fraction closer to where you want to get to. You know, it's like that's just the truth. I suck. Like it's like, truthfully though.
Yeah. So you're unique. You know that. And what I mean when I say that is you come from a position of extreme ownership. You are exceptionally disciplined and you're clearly talented, although I don't attribute your success to that. I attribute it more to discipline and ownership, to be honest, and determination than talent. But you have all of those things. And so my message isn't to the people listening. It's not you suck. It's you have a skill deficiency and probably a knowledge deficiency that is currently holding you back, and it has nothing to do with you. It's just the reality of the game. Yeah. And it's no different, man. Like, let's put it in another slightly simpler context. It's the equivalent of sitting down at the piano, not being able to play Mozart and go, what the fuck's wrong with me? Like, when you put it in that context, it sounds fucking dumb. But that's what business owners and adult human beings do every single day in every other aspect of life. We just expect to be great. It's like, no, greatness has a cost. Greatness has a price. And you can choose not to pay that price, that's fine. But if you want greatness and you really want greatness and you're happy to work for 20 years to get greatness, there is a price and a cost. And that price and the cost is I'm going to have a skill deficiency. A lot of the time I'm going to feel inadequate. It's going to come with a lot of self-doubt. It's going to come with a lot of hard work. And so that's the price.
What did you always have this wildly wise perspective about business? Like where were you before you started? Like talk me back to about like, before starting business, before getting into, the Entourage or building this company, because you said you've been in business for about 20 years now. What was happening before then? Because you've obviously developed this, wildly broad perspective on business, and I'm listening to, you communicate very articulately about these specific challenges, and I'm like, what was going on beforehand?
Well, a couple of things. So I grew up in a house where I was surrounded, like from the age of 1, I was surrounded by books on human psychology, management, leadership, neuro-linguistic programming, cognitive behavioral therapy. And so you know the program 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard. It's like old school. Yeah. I was listening to the Ken Blanchard 1 Minute Manager cassette tapes when I was like 14.
Dude.
And so, get his name. There was a guy that had like a monster NLP program. I found one when I was about I haven't actually told this story before. when I was 19, my dad lives in Dalesford, and when I was about 19, they have a storage shed there, and we were moving stuff from the storage shed to somewhere else. I can't actually remember where we were moving it, but he found a box of my stuff, and I opened it up, and there was 2, the ring binder folders. There's 2 ring binder folders kind of this thick, and like, how they're usually like a triangle?
Oh, yes.
Thing, and they weren't a triangle because they were stacked full of paper.
Right. It's flat. I know exactly what you mean.
Exactly.
Yeah, because there's so much in it.
There's so much in it. 2 of them, so however many pages that is, probably a couple of thousand per binder.
Right.
Size 11 font of my study notes from a neuro-linguistic programming program that I did over CD, probably when I was, 16 or 17.
Wow.
And so to answer your question, I mean, there's a lot about my foundational development that gave rise to a certain understanding of how I operate and how I communicate and human potential and human behavior. And then the next thing that I needed to learn was that's not enough. And so when I was like 18 to 22, I was doing a lot of personal development programs and things like so kind of continuing along that psychology route. With some of the best people in the world. And it was interesting to me because they would talk about this personal development. They say, come to these events and buy these trainings and all of that kind of stuff, and you'll make more money and become successful in business and all that kind of stuff. And I'd go through a training, and then the group would stay connected and social events and stuff for the years succeeding. And what I found strange was I was progressing sort of in business, but nobody else was. And so,
as in the people in that community,
exactly,
you were just noticing they were similar, stagnant, and you were progressing.
Exactly.
Got it.
Not progressing at the rate I wanted to, but I was progressing a little bit.
Got it.
The main observation was that nobody else was, and so I was kind of like, but hold on. We did all of these, big events and personal development things, and they promised, you'd start thinking like Warren Buffett and you'd be a billionaire, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, but I mean, everybody here is still broke. What's going on?
Right.
And so the thing that I needed to learn is that the grounding in personal development and human psychology is a phenomenal foundation, but it's not enough to be successful in business. Why? Because business is a field and an endeavor and a body of knowledge in and of itself.
Yeah, right.
And so my next big break came when I started MBE Group with a guy called Ruben Buchanan. Ruben was, I was probably 20 years of age at the time. Ruben was probably 38 at the time. Ruben had started and sold Wealth Creator magazine, which was around when we were teenagers. And then he went into essentially doing deals. So he would help businesses raise money, buy businesses, build value, and exit. And he'd take a piece along the way.
Nice.
And he was very good at it. Long story short, I helped him do a few things, and I made him a lot of money in a very short period of time. And then he said, let's start a business together where Ruben will be the face of it and the talent of it, and it'll be a kind of education training company around how to raise money, buy businesses, and sell businesses. And so co-founding MBE with Ruben was where I really started to build my business knowledge and business understanding. And so, by the age of 21, I was making $1 million a year. And then I started Entourage when I was 23.
Wow.
Yeah, on the back of the success of MBE. And so it's kind of, to come back to your question, man, in terms of like, where does my perspective come from? I think it comes from foundational understanding in human behavior and human psychology. It comes from obsession around business and getting around the right people early, and then 20 years of hard work and trial and error.
What do you think? Because so I had this environment quite similar in some respect. However, I just ignored it. So I had a lot of exposure to psychology and personal development. My dad was Buddhist and had all these different perspectives about world, spirituality, all these things.
That's awesome.
I just completely ignored it.
Right.
I was like, this guy's completely kooky. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to listen to any of this stuff. He's walking around the house in a robe. I'm like, with the beads. I'm like,
he's got the beads.
I was like, no way, man. I'm like, I'm switched off to this.
Pass.
Yeah, and he's giving me these books and sharing these things with me, and it was completely. I'm like, my older brother was always reading books, and I was always just like, dude, books are for nerds. I didn't kind of have any form of input of new information, and I think it was after about 25 where I was like, hey, maybe there's a lot of things you don't know, and maybe there's some other people that you should learn. And I started reading for the first time, and I was like, whoa, I've got some catching up to do. So I really started reading a lot. like what do you think it was about you that you were like, hey, like I'm actually going to do this stuff and be into this stuff, as opposed to, like, for example, my mindset was just like, okay, it's all there. You can learn if you want to, but I'm like, no, fuck that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, because you were like, I'm into it, I'm studying it, I'm doing the NLP at like 14, 15, 16. And like, that's quite unique.
Very. It must be something innate. Because I was one of 3 brothers, and neither of my brothers lent into it. Grew up in the same house, same parents, same time, same environment.
Same. I got 3 brothers, 1 sister. Myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it must be something innate that causes one to resonate with whatever they resonate with. It's interesting, the Buddhism thing, because in 2022, whether you were consciously aware of it or not, you probably started to employ some Buddhism philosophy and principles because you would have needed to, just to kind of sustain yourself through it.
Yeah, correct.
So what happened with me in 2016, we became a college, went into accredited education environment, went into the space incredibly successfully, and so kind of had a bunch of business units all booming. And then the government re-regulated that industry, pushing everybody back to university and TAFE. And that sent us into, we were losing about $500,000 a month, and I was 3 months away from losing $800,000 a month. So I had to go from like 90 people to 40 people in a matter of days. That didn't solve the problem. That just brought me 2 weeks to solve the problem. And so that began the hardest 3 years of my life, as I kind of fought that initial distressed period and then grew myself out of the hole.
Yeah.
What I found in 2016 is I kind of had to start doing some of the more, because I'd always had the high performance personal development type principles, which you've undoubtedly got as well.
Sure.
But I had to, for it was, as one micro example, I started meditating. And I started to go a bit deeper into the spirituality stuff. And one of the key kind of lessons for me through that period was pre-2016, I had, this is direct philosophy from Buddhism, is what we tend to do is we kind of like erect this scaffolding around us that's usually ego around who we are, right? And so I'm an entrepreneur and I'm successful and I'm making $2 million a month and I've got a team of 90 and I'm on this list and I'm on that, and there's this scaffolding, and it's kind of like it's all just masks, right? It's all barriers between the world and the real you. Yeah. And so what happens when we go through a period of extreme distress, whether it's in our personal life or in business, is it's like a complete destruction of the scaffolding, because you get back to the real you. And so I think that Buddhism type philosophies can be really useful, particularly as you mature through life and inevitably go through really challenging periods.
How was that like personally for you from going, and having all of the, essentially what you've built your business on taken away from?
Dude, it was the most scared I've ever been in my life.
Yeah.
We were seriously distressed for probably 12 months.
Wow.
And then
so this was all due to that system, the regulations changing. They stripped it back and they were like, this is only existing in the TAFEs and the colleges.
Correct. And I mean, from a personal responsibility standpoint, I went into it too aggressively and allowed my other business units to either plateau or drift off because we were going so aggressively into that space. And so we were a registered training organisation, like a college. We were becoming a higher education provider in the process of that, which is a very expensive process. So that you can offer like bachelor degrees and doctorates. We were going to launch that stuff into the Singaporean market because Australian qualifications carry a greater weight in Southeast Asia than Southeast Asian qualifications do. And so we were going all in on it. And if I did anything with the government today, I would firstly, I'd question whether I would do it in the first place. And secondly, if I did do it, I would be hedging a lot more than I was. And so, the government regulation was the trigger that brought it all down. But it was my naivety and aggression that put me in a position where it could bring me down.
You just saw what you wanted to see. You're like, this is the opportunity right here, kind of thing.
And I just didn't have the years of experience or the perspective to understand what governments do. What governments did, so it's called the VET sector, vocational education and training. What governments did in VET is what they do in every, like I've now seen the pattern play out several times. And I'll tell you exactly what they do.
Right.
We saw it with vocational education and training. We saw it with roof vats and solar.
Yeah.
We're now seeing it with NDIS.
So true.
Like it's the same thing. And what they do is they go, there's an area here that deserves investment. They throw a lot of money at it. And because there's a high degree of incompetence in the government, they often don't know what the providers are actually going to be doing in any endeavor, whether it's education, solar, or NDIS. They don't have a granular understanding of what they're regulating, therefore they can't regulate it effectively. It runs for 2 or 3 years. A bunch of dodgy providers start taking advantage of the government system so that they can make money, exploit it essentially fraudulently. That exploitation then gets on the front page of newspapers, and all politicians care about is front page of newspapers. And then rather than going, who are the smartest people in this industry that we could bring in to help us amend the regulations to optimize it so that we can weed out the dodgy providers and enable the successful. They don't do that.
Do the intelligent thing that would benefit the whole.
Don't do that. What's far more media worthy is get a wrecking ball and come through it, and then in 3 to 6 months' time, the front page of the newspaper is this big extreme thing that the government's done, which is often to wipe out whatever it is that they were just trying to, kind of catalyze, and so that's a pattern that today I know that pattern exists.
Right.
2015, 2016, 27-year-old Jack didn't. And so this is the thing, man, and you know this better than anybody. Everybody knows the cost of education. Everybody knows the cost of going and getting a coach, going and getting a mentor. What a lot of people don't fully quantify is the cost of ignorance.
Yeah.
You and I know that the biggest mistakes that we've made have cost us tens of millions of dollars. And I reckon I've probably, in my 20 years in business, I've probably spent 10 years fixing mistakes. And so another way of putting that is I've probably felt like I've been succeeding and growing for 10 of the years out of the 20. The other 10, I've just been paying for mistakes that I made due to ignorance.
So true.
And so that's why, particularly today, one of my core kind of approaches to business is to engage coaches and spend ridiculous amounts of money getting around the right people and in the right rooms, because it gives you a perspective and a wisdom and an understanding that if you didn't pay the money up front to get, you're going to pay it through very costly mistakes.
Because even if you think about it, like even as you're saying that, I think I'm just having this kind of like realization perhaps, but it's like I've probably spent in excess of, I'd say 700, maybe 800,000.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
On different people that I've worked with. And so even like, as I'm thinking that right now, I'm like, okay, so how much have I like directly net lost due to ignorance?
Yes.
And it would be millions and millions and millions.
Yes.
And so it's like, would it have not been more cheap or cost efficient to potentially have a $500,000 a year freaking mentor?
Yes,
to work with.
exactly.
Like, hey, rather than spending $3 million over there on that net loss that has no actual gain,
in 4 years,
how about we do it together and just pay me $500,000?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so people go, I don't want to engage a coach or I don't want to engage a mentor because it's going to cost money.
Yeah.
Here's the truth. You are going to buy these lessons one way or another.
Yeah.
You're either going to do it the easy way and the cheap way, or you're going to buy it with time, pain, mistakes, energy, and potential and years of your life. And so paying money to people to get answers and get things done faster and easier is the accelerant.
Yeah. What are some of the like typical trends or typical kind of like almost like stages and problems that people face in those stages as they're growing companies? You said you've got exposure to thousands of different businesses and you've seen this landscape where you've watched businesses evolve. So are there some particular kind of things where it's like at this stage you're having this problem, at this stage you're probably going to have this problem?
That's kind of the journey we went through earlier in terms of 0 to a couple $100,000. You don't need to have a product.
Yeah.
A couple $100,000 to $500,000, you don't have enough traffic. $500,000 plus, you probably want to optimize your conversions. $1 million plus, you want to start bringing in a team, or all that kind of stuff. I think more broadly, the number one thing that I see constrains founders, because we talk about businesses about growing from constraint to constraint. If you don't know what the number one constraint on your business is right now, then you're the constraint.
Right. So how would I'm looking at my business right now and I'm like, got it, there's a whole bunch of fires and they're all burning. How do I know what to fucking focus on?
The question is, what's the biggest challenge in this business right now that, if solved, would make the biggest difference. And then you want to focus singularly and maniacally on that until it's solved. And then you want to move on to the next one. Your ability to identify the most meaningful constraint at any given moment will develop the more external input you have from people who've been there, done that experience, and the more experience that you get under your belt. But really, it's the number one skill of the entrepreneur is, you know, a lot of business owners are running around and they're kind of in their business and they're running from one thing to the next. It's this entrepreneurial ADHD, right? I'm doing this, and then I'm doing this, and I'm doing this. And I'm not really moving the needle, but I feel busy and I feel productive. What I'm really doing is just chasing dopamine. The skill of the entrepreneur is to pause, turn the fucking phone off, get out of your email inbox, close Instagram, and adopt a 30,000 foot view of your business and look at it. Every business is just a conceptual assembly line, right? You look at the conceptual assembly line and go, where is the number one bottleneck that, if resolved, would benefit the assembly line, the production line, to the greatest degree? And so what is the production line? It's the same for every business. It starts with marketing. So we go out into the world and we generate interest and attention, we generate leads and we generate traffic. It then comes to conversions and sales, converting people into paid customers at the highest possible price that's reasonable for them to pay. You've marketed it, you've then sold it, you then need to deliver it, you need to deliver it well, and you need to service your customers, and you need to extend lifetime value, the LTV of all of your customers. You're doing all of that, you need to be operationalizing that with systems and technology so that it's all happening in the most efficient and effective way possible.
Got it.
You then need to count and manage the money, which is finance. And what's underpinning all of those 5 functions is people. And so you need to have a high degree of management and leadership skill. And so if you can look at your production line through those lenses and go, right now, where's the biggest bottleneck in that production line?
Got it.
That'll help you identify.
Simplifies it a lot when you think about it from that perspective. And especially thinking about it from the perspective of a production line.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because it's so easy in a service-based business. Well, I'm delivering service. I don't have a production line. I'm not producing a product in China, for example.
Correct.
How would I be a production line? It's like, no.
Yeah,
it's exactly the same.
It's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
You just said it simplifies it. That's exactly what every entrepreneur should be trying to do. Is we are really good at complicating shit. And I was guilty of this too. You know, as entrepreneurs, we tend to go from complicating stuff to simplifying, and then it kind of gets easy and we start making money and we complicate it again.
Correct.
Kind of go through these cycles. And so we're really good at complicating stuff. Business is simple. What grows a business is not new or novel or exciting. It's usually the fundamentals that just need doing.
Dirty, boring, mundane.
100%.
Mind-numbing shit.
Correct. Yeah.
And there's this bias. I think I can't recall where it was from, but it was like the longer that you spend trying to like fix a problem, the more complex you rationalize the actual solution must be.
Yes.
So like, I've been working on this for like 6 months.
Yeah.
Surely it can't be just that little simple thing.
Yeah.
You're like, no. It's got to be something really difficult, really challenging, and you'll actually overlook the things right in front of you. It's so stupid.
What I often see even before that is entrepreneur has an intuitive understanding that there's a particular constraint in their business, but they distract themselves with something else.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to address the core problem.
What causes that?
It's a desire to procrastinate.
Yeah.
And so when you're procrastinating, or you're not avoiding the task, you're avoiding the emotional uncomfortability that comes with sitting in the problem and therefore completing the task.
Right.
And so what we tend to do as really intelligent entrepreneurs is we go, there's this thing that's really, really difficult. And what we do is we try and find the next thing that's also difficult and will also keep us busy, but isn't the main thing, so that we can get busy and feel productive while we procrastinate. And we're really procrastinating against the number one question or the number one challenge or the number one conversation or the number one thing that we know we actually should be doing. We busy ourselves with everything else. This is universal, man. This is, if the people listening to this podcast could just understand this one core principle, it would change the way they operate, it would change who they are as a human being. Most people, when they come into business every day, the first thing they do is open their email and open their inbox.
React, yeah.
And all your email and all your inbox is a bunch of other people's requests and demands of your time. It's other people's to-do list for you.
Yeah.
And so it's much easier to come into the office or to go into wherever it is you work from, open the inbox and then spend your life being reactive to all of the other fires and the emails and the distractions and the social media and the staff problems and the cash flow. You know, we spend way too much time reacting. What you want to do and what tends to happen as one matures as an entrepreneur is you stop playing in reactive mode, which is like playing defense, and you start playing in proactive mode, which is, what is the number one constraint on my business right now? What are the core initiatives that I need to deploy in order to unlock that constraint? And how do I allocate as much time as possible to only doing that?
It's interesting because so what you were saying there, I remember, like, I've done this for years in terms of distracting myself, but it's interesting because I think as people transition, for example, from like a 9-to-5 position or anything, like they are so used to being directed. Right. And so like
and school, university,
across the entire kind of like from zero till the point you start. And so it's like, all right, I'm going to start my own thing now. Waiting for orders, please.
Exactly. Waiting for structure.
Should someone tell me what to do?
100%.
I'll just jump to my inbox or to my Instagram because at least I've got some feeling of like I'm getting some attention to do something. I'm
getting the dopamine.
I'll just reply.
Yeah. I'm getting the dopamine and I feel busy.
And it's very confronting sometimes when you've zeroed the noise and you sit there with like a blank sheet and you're like, okay, so what do I actually do? You know what I mean? Like,
and what will actually move the needle? Right? It's spot on. And so here's the thing: if I said to business owners right now, the vast majority of business owners at any given point feel overly busy, overly stressed, bursting at the seams.
Correct.
If I said I could clear 90% of your schedule, at a conscious level, they would go, oh, that would be amazing. But then if they sat with it and thought about it for a moment, at an unconscious level, what they would be met with is trepidation and fear. Terrifying. Yeah. Why is it terrifying? Because if you come in, let's say you come into the office and you've got 8 hours ahead of you and 6 of those hours are blank. Now you need to think. Now you need to be proactive. Now you need to take initiative on the most important and the most challenging things in your business. It's so much easier to lose yourself in the fucking inbox and to shoot content all day thinking that's what's going to move the needle, right? And so of course I'm going to do that because there's more emotional reward to it because I get the dopamine and I feel productive and I can say I answered 300 emails today. Dude, it would terrify you how little attention and importance I place on emails. My phone is always on silent. It's so hard to reach me because I don't spend any of my time. Well, let's say I probably spend 3 to 5% of my time in React, and 95% of my time is by design. I've done the thinking. I've gotten clear. I know what the fucking hardest challenge in the business is right now. And that's where, as the leader, I need to spend 95% of my time. And that is all I'm going to do relentlessly until it is done. And then I'm going to find the next most difficult thing. And so operating that way means that I maximize the time I can spend on the hardest challenges. That is what grows businesses, not fucking inboxes.
Yeah. I had an example of this when I... very, very similar situation. So when I had my office and I think we had probably like 20 staff in the office at maybe 22 staff at one point. And it was very interesting because I had no idea on managing people, any form of like structures, any form of like, I think I read like the Rockefeller habits. And so the one thing that I took out of that I was like, maybe I'm just going to implement this because fuck it, it makes sense, was like, the meeting cadence. That was the one thing. And so I was
definitely, which is super useful.
I was like, let's just implement like, and I was a freakazoid with it. I was like, all right, let's just have like 3 meetings a day, morning, midday, and then afternoon. And so we would have stand-ups like in the morning, 8 a.m. and we'd have at 12 o'clock, how you going so far? What are you done? What are you done? What are you done? And I was like managing the hell out of this thing. And then end of the day would be the same thing. And it was so interesting because it was the absolute epitome of this reactive type situation. I had people in the company that I was watching and observing, and because I didn't know what I was measuring, I didn't know what they were doing or weren't doing. I didn't have any clear plans for months or quarters. It was just what's happening right now and what the fuck do we do? Or what are we going to do right now? What are we going to do for the next half an hour? What are we going to do tomorrow? And so like the really terrifying thing for me was when I actually got rid of the office and went remote, and I was like, how am I going to manage people? How am I going to see what's going on? And I was in this illusion where I was like, well, you're tricked into thinking that just because you can see, Johnny at the desk over there, you know that he's actually working. And it's like, you're completely full of shit. Like, he could be sitting there doing absolutely nothing, right? And you're thinking that because you can watch him and observe him, there's some reaction that I'm thinking, okay, he's good.
Definitely.
And so when we actually went remote, it was like, okay, it forced that kind of like system building, and it was like, well, you have to build some structure,
and you have to manage to outcomes.
Right, exactly. So it was tremendously valuable actually, and it worked out to be one of the best things we did. How do people go from this reactive based situation to beginning to transition into being like think and plan and organize? Because like it's very easy to get trapped in that, and you can spend your entire career, life even, react mode.
I can tell people how to achieve that in the next 30 seconds.
Oh shit.
100% guaranteed.
Oh shit. I'm listening.
If you are watching this podcast right now, if you are listening to this podcast right now, what I want you to do is press pause. I want you to go into your calendar, and I want you to set every morning from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. strategic deep work time. Call it what you want. Call it deep work, call it strategy time, call it quadrant 2 time, call it important shit. I don't care what you fucking call it. 2 hours every morning. Now, if you absolutely find that to be impossible, which I would challenge and find hard to believe, then do it for 3 days out of 5. But everybody's got time. It's just that everybody says they're busy. Nobody's busy. It's just that they feel overwhelmed. The reason they feel overwhelmed is because they haven't done the thinking. Yeah. And so 2 hours every morning of deep work. What does that mean? You turn the phone off. You get out of your emails. You turn off any distraction. If you use Slack or Microsoft Teams, you get out of that. Unless you need one of those things to complete the deep work, you're not in them at all. And all you do is you sit there in the uncomfortability and you wrestle with the biggest challenge that you have to do in that day and over that period of time, and moving the needle on that. If you just do that for 2 hours every morning, this is what will happen. You'll get addicted to it. Because it will change your business. By day 2, your business will be changed. Yeah. By day 2, you will be changed. By day 2, you will have proven to yourself that you have been operating in a way that is wildly inefficient. Comfortable, which is why you've been doing it, but wildly inefficient. And everything's taking 10 times as long as it needs to. It's costing 10 times as much as it should because you haven't had the fucking emotional bravery to sit down with a blank canvas and do the work that you know needs to be done.
Yeah, it's a hard truth to face when you actually sit down and do that. I had something similar happen where I was in Toowoomba recently with this whole cyclone thing that happened in cyclone in the Gold Coast. I mean, I think some people had it bad. But so my wife and I we were I think it was like Wednesday or something. We were like, oh, screw this. I'm just gonna leave because I don't want to have no internet, no power. So we just like we just bailed, and we went up to Toowoomba. And so my mum lives up there, and we got an Airbnb up there for I think it was 4 days, 5 days, something like that. And it was super interesting because I'm in this environment. We're staying in this little cottage. I didn't know anyone there. It was raining and just outside all day, every day. And it was like the ultimate of just like everything's cut off. No distractions, right? I didn't know anyone around the place. My mum came over a couple of times, but it was just the ultimate, like the amount that I got done because every single thing was removed. Like I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't have any reason to do anything. All the food was there. It was just like go to the fridge, eat, sit on my laptop, work. And I got done the most obscene amount of work in like 4 days and came back and was like whole entire sales process, rewritten, everything.
Exactly.
And it was just like, wow, 4 days.
Exactly.
You multiply that across the entire year. It's like you transform your whole company.
Exactly. Sales process is the perfect example of that deep work, quadrant 2 time that shifts the needle so incredibly significantly, but we never get to because it's not urgent and it's not screaming at us. Yeah. But you spend, let's say you spent 1 day out of those 4 days on your sales process. Let's say that moves your sales conversions from 25%. I won't ask you for the figures, but I'm assuming if you were at 25%, you probably would have gone to 40%. Let's assume you didn't. Let's assume you went from 25% to 30%. Right? That's not a 5% increase. That's a 25% increase. And so you're now generating 25% more revenue with no extra conversations, no extra leads. You're not spending any more money on marketing. You're just converting 25% more.
Correct.
Which means a disproportionate amount of that is probably falling to the bottom line because your fixed costs are covered.
Correct.
And it took you a day.
Correct.
And so it's just the perfect example of what can be achieved when you are either forced to be proactive, which is what you were then, or choose to be proactive, which we all have the choice to do every day. But let's kind of bring this point home. I just told everybody listening to this podcast to pause it and to put in 2 hours every morning in their calendar. And so my question for you, if you're listening to this podcast right now, is why the fuck are you still listening to it? Because you haven't put that shit in your calendar. And so I'm going to say it again. I want you to hit pause. I want you to stop listening to this podcast for 3 minutes. And I want you to put a recurring, deep work, 2-hour time slot in your calendar, Monday to Friday, recurring forever. You can stop it at any given moment that you want to, but I guarantee you, you'll do it for the first time tomorrow morning. You'll do it for the second time the morning after that. By that point, you'll be addicted to it. You'll do it for the rest of your life. Pause the fucking podcast and do that now.
Dude, that process alone, I would say, is. I remember prior to actually operating from that perspective, I'd be the massive morning routine guy, the meditation, the cold shower, the exercise, come home and do. Dude, I had it was about 2.5 hours. And I remember it was ridiculous, right? Yeah. And then I would get into actually work time by 8 o'clock, and I was like, wow, I was like, this is really cool. But I was like, really though? I was distracted, and there's so much energy already gone into the other things.
I find I'm fatigued when I do that.
Right. And so I just adjusted that completely, I think, thanks to Alex Hormozy and his just brutal honesty around it. And I was just like, okay, so what if you just woke up and did I usually do about 10 minutes of breath work, and I would just have black coffee and work. Yeah. And so I'm in the zone as of 5:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock sometimes. And it's just the speed that you get from your highest cognitive power directly into solving those biggest problems. Yeah. No one's talking to you. No one. It's just that rain to just be this is where my energy goes. It's 100%. Wildly powerful.
That's exactly what I do. So I stumbled across, again, just through trial and error, just through trying different stuff. In about 2019, so this is late, man. I'd been in business for, 14, 15 years by this point. 2019, I was working on a project that had different complexities and triangulating a bunch of different stuff in order to build out a cohesive strategy. And I can't remember what forced me to do it or whether I just had the idea to do it, but one morning I just woke up and rolled out of bed, started doing it. And deep work.
All right.
And
so you just were oh, fuck it, let's just try this.
Yes.
Wow.
And what I found is that, I probably was in that mode for 4 hours and, had breakfast somewhere in the middle. What I found is that my brain power was so high that I probably got done what would have taken me 2 weeks that morning. It was the movie Limitless. It was literally literally. It was as if I'd had the Limitless pill and my ability to think and move through complex scenarios and triangulate and develop something cohesive out of a lot of detail was, I'd say, probably 3 or 4x to what it would be around midday, for example. Yeah. And so I do exactly what you just mentioned. I don't do it from 9 to 11. I do it generally from probably about 5 a.m. Until I start fatiguing. Yeah. And so I don't really care when somebody does it. My rule is just done by 1. You have to have those at minimum 2 hours. It's better if it's 4 hours or 6 hours, but done by 1 p.m.
What are some of the maybe more mental blocks and things that you see that founders have that keep them stuck or keep them from actually developing into maybe keep them stagnant? You know what I mean? Because I recall so many times growing my business or any of my businesses, you get to a certain level and you're you feel it's you, similar to what we were saying before, but it's there's some mental block. And the thing is as well, the interesting thing is when you actually unlock the next level and you grow, you're oh, that was so easy. You know what I mean? But when you're in it, you're I can't possibly, how do I, maybe I'm just not meant for this. You know what I mean? So are there some things that you see from a psychological perspective, mindset perspective that really, really, really keep people trapped?
So let's dive into the conversation we started earlier, which is the number one reason people don't achieve their goals is that they avoid hard. Yeah. And so what happens from a psychology perspective is when the human mind, and it's the same for all of us, when it comes up against something that's hard, it seeks to retreat.
Yeah.
Because it seeks to retreat back into what's familiar and back into what's comfortable. Because the human brain isn't designed to make us successful, it's designed to make us survive. And therefore, it's designed to only see threats. 10,000 years ago, the threat was a saber-toothed tiger. Today, the threat is the conversation with one of my staff that I don't want to have. Yeah. Today, the threat is the 2 hours I've now got in my calendar tomorrow that Jack forced me to put there that's making me feel nervous. The threat is I've got the presentation in 3 days and I don't feel prepared. And so when you start to up-level in any area of your life, what happens is you get to a point where it's no longer familiar, it's no longer comfortable, and at that point the mind seeks to retreat back into what is comfortable. The best book on this subject is a book called The Big Leap by a guy called Gay Hendricks. And it's called The Big Leap, and in it what he talks about is, he calls it the upper limit problem, which is such a beautifully succinct way of explaining the concept I'm talking about now, which is it happens with money, career, relationships, happiness. We've all got a baseline, right, of where we think we should be. And when we go above that baseline and start to rise into a greater level, what happens is our internal thermostat kicks in, and like it would on the temperature of a room. If it gets too hot, it makes it cooler. You come back to baseline. Got it. Gets too cool, it makes it warmer. You come back to baseline. Got it. And so, the fundamental thing to understand is that if you're anybody with a dream or anybody that's looking to grow personally or professionally, you're constantly going to be reinventing yourself and coming into new levels of identity. And it's like, how do you get over the upper limit problem? It's significantly more simple than what most people think. The first thing is you have a name for it and you anticipate it. It's like if you're trying to get in the best shape of your life, when you're about 60, 70% of the way there, you're going to start eating crap because you're going to be so far away from your baseline at a subconscious level, you're going to want to return to where you were. And so if you can anticipate that that's going to happen, and then as it happens, you don't meet the desire to retreat with any kind of weight because you're like, this is the I know it's going to happen. It's like this is that upper limit thing, right? And then you double down on the habits that have been causing you to get there in the first place, so that you can burst through your upper limit, and so that your what used to be your upper limit becomes your new normal. And so that's the fundamental thing. I think if we can structure our days, structure our weeks, structure our businesses, structure our psyche such that we lean into the most difficult things on a consistent basis, that is what changes everything.
I want to circle back for a second to the situation that you went through there, where the regulations were passed. You had to pull back out of the education sector and really have some pretty significant changes to the business. I think Andy Grove in Only the Paranoid Survive, he talks about that, and he calls it inflection points. Where significant things happen, whether it's a competitor, whether it's a market, something changes the landscape disproportionate to what you had ever predicted, and it's like, holy shit, we need to make a change. Do you think that that most founders will go through something of that nature, something like strategic, something of an inflection point that's like, I need to fundamentally change the way I'm playing the game?
Regularly, if not always. And it will come as a result of one of two things. You'll be coming into your upper limit and you'll need to rewire your relationship with the next level. Or, like my 2016 and your 2022, it'll come through extreme challenge that necessitates accelerated development.
How would you advise navigating situations like that? Like if you were to look at yourself and be like, all right, Jack, this is what you want to do through this. How would you have advised yourself today with the knowledge and experience you have to get through that kind of inflection point differently and maybe more successfully?
Which one?
The 2016.
The thing with 2016 is I succeeded. And so, at the time I was meeting with administrators and liquidators, people that wind up businesses, and they're all saying the same thing. Like, Jack, you can't trade out of this. You're gone.
Wow.
And we were,
facing the devil.
Dude, we got to a point where I was probably about $5 million in debt. As I said, losing $500,000 a month. The main business model that was generating the income was no longer tenable. And so it's like, you've got nothing to trade and you're 5 million in the hole and you're currently 500K below your current cost base. And so any intelligent person just would have waved the white flag. And that's what people were telling me to do. And fast forward through the hardest 3 or 4 years of my life, we had repaid every single dollar that we owed to everybody. This is the thing people don't realize: when a business winds up, the staff lose. Any clients that have paid you previously, they lose out. Yeah. Your creditors lose. The tax office, not that we should worry about the tax office financial position, but you're not going to square away with the tax office. Yeah. Any investors that invest, everybody loses. And so sometimes it's easier for the founder to wave the white flag, but if it's a net loss for everybody else, then you need to ask yourself whether that's a decision you're happy to make. And for me, it wasn't.
And it's also like, can you sleep with that as well? Knowing that like it's like...
Exactly. Yeah, precisely. And then there's even a practical element to that as well, which is reputationally, you want to be known as somebody that is able to deliver on their promises, especially when it's hard. That's really important. And so 2016, we succeeded in, like, dude... A few years later, we went from like being the bank's worst client, who they did not like, to like they thought that we walked on water because they didn't understand how we came back from it. And so I once it happened, I probably wouldn't do anything differently from a tactical perspective. I might have brought down the cost base a little bit more to make it a bit easier for myself.
Got it.
But it worked. What I would do differently comes back to the Buddhism stuff that we were speaking about before, which is I didn't need to put myself through so much anguish in order to achieve that.
During that, you were like, this is your fucking fault.
Yes, 100%. And then, you're not sleeping, you're not eating well.
So true.
You get to Friday, I'd have a couple of wines.
Yeah. Escapism a little bit, yeah.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
A lot of it. And so, because of the shame. And so, what I would say in hindsight is it comes from that, the whole perspective of like, and it's so much easier said than done, which is why I'm almost reluctant to say it, but your identity isn't the shit that you do.
Yeah.
You're an entrepreneur. It's not tied to any one business. And business is challenging. And so, 2016, Jack, you're going through a challenging time. Welcome to the fucking club. Welcome to the big leagues. And so and so I could have gone a lot easier on myself. And if anything, that would have made me better tactically because I wouldn't have been drowning in shame and sleeplessness every day.
Right.
So that's probably, again, it's easy to apply that in hindsight because the whole lesson that I'm talking to you about now, the only way I learned that was through 3 years of suffering.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, unfortunately, particularly people like you and I, we kind of need the experience sometimes to get the lesson. Slow learners, right?
Someone can tell it to you. You're just going to be beaten with a stick.
Some people did try and tell it to me ahead of it. I remember one advisor saying to me, Jack, if someone can come along with a cannonball and put it through your business and you're gone, that's a business that's too risky. Dude, I was 26. I was making more money than I knew. I was like, what?
Respectfully, pal.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's that whole thing, universe talks to you with a feather and eventually a brick.
Yeah.
And then
the truck, I think it is.
Yeah. And so,
I've yet to find the truck yet, but I've found a lot of bricks.
Touch wood. But I got the truck.
Yeah. Are there some like leading indicators that you look for now in your businesses that perhaps are like early warning signs of situations like that might emerge? Because I think like...
Dude, that is a beautiful question.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, like situations like that, like hopefully teach you, right, what to look for and what not to look for. And so I always love to think about like problems don't just happen, there's certain signals that happen, right? So it's like now that you've had this happen, when you're in the environment, are you like, ooh...
It's exactly what we spoke about before. When you know there's a particular risk point or challenge or constraint in your business and you come into the business every day and you're in the email inbox and getting distracted by what the staff ask you to do and running from customer complaint to customer complaint and not addressing the core things that need to be addressed, you're accruing debt.
Yeah.
You're accruing operational debt. You're accruing challenge debt. You're accruing decision debt. You're accruing time debt. You might even be accruing financial debt, but that's not the main thing I'm talking about. I'm talking about you're accruing an operational debt because of escapism. It might not be a couple of wines on a Friday. It might be the fucking email inbox.
Like, I think it's also with the operation, particularly operational debt. This is something I've observed. So because you're not actually focused on any of the problems, and then so I find that what happens is you avoid actually leading your team effectively, and so all the capacity of your team shrinks. So then you overhire, and you've got a whole bunch of people doing like 30% of their actual true capacity. So you've got a very, similar to what you mentioned, operationally heavy, expensive company that doesn't need to be. And it's only because your attention's over here, and you're like, just hire another person, find someone to fix it, rather than being like, what's the problem here, pal? Like, let's actually fix this thing.
100%. Yeah. And even that style of operating is a way of distraction and escapism. You know, when I was a lot younger, I would equate success with revenue and headcount. But not these days. I equate success with achieving the maximum possible goal with as little a headcount as possible. 10 years ago, I wanted as much headcount as possible because that was one of my success metrics. As build an army, let's go. And so even that, for me, that just came from I didn't care about money enough, because I'm not money driven. And that's not the same as saying I don't think money is important. Money is critical, as you and I and probably every person listening to the podcast has learned time and time. Money is incredibly important. It's just not my driver.
Got it.
And so, Jack, who's focusing on revenue and focusing on growing headcount, that's irresponsible. That's escapism. That's being the number one constraint, and that's accruing debt.
Because it's a very it's kind of the epitome of like solving problems from a reactive basis. It's like, we have a problem, let's just hire someone else. Let's just hire another person, rather than being like, so this whole system seems to be really inefficient.
It's
if you extrapolate this forward, we're going to lose more money.
It's intellectually lazy. And it's emotionally lazy. Because when we procrastinate and when we avoid leading into what's difficult, there is a huge emotional reward to that. Not only do I not have to deal with the emotional discomfort of the real problem, but I also get the immediate emotional reward of the dopamine or the hugs and high fives of doing other stuff that's not as important. And so there's a huge emotional reward there. And so it always comes back. The question is always, who's driving the bus? And it's obviously the founder, but are you driving it from your lowest level self or your highest level self? And the more you can operate in life and business from your highest level self, the more you can consciously and purposely seek out what are the biggest challenges right now and how do I personally manage them, the better your life will be. If you make easy choices, your life will be hard. If you make hard choices, your life will be easy. You just choose your fucking hard. And I can tell you, you can probably hear the fucking anguish and pain in my voice. It's like, it's so much easier just to do what's difficult proactively rather than dealing with the accumulated debt 5 years down the track. Because
you always have the forced hand. Like, it's like you have, this is what I've experienced so many times. It's like you have the opportunity to do the same thing on your own terms and under your complete agency. Or usually what happens is, it's like 12 months later, 18 months later, 2 years later, the hand gets forced and the terms are very unfavorable.
Beautiful.
And you're like,
that's exactly it.
Why did I not just do this? It would have cost me a fraction of the amount and I would be in so much less pain.
Exactly. Exactly. Here's the other interesting thing about leaning into difficult things is the more you do what's difficult, the less willpower it takes. And let's put that in practical terms, right? You're obviously in incredibly good physical shape. How many days a week do you train?
6.
I
usually 7. I go for a run one day. And 6 to 7 days.
Right. And so probably 6 days lifting weights and 1 day cardio, running,
combination of like weights and fighting and running, a whole bunch of things.
And so let's say you're going to the gym one afternoon. Throughout the day, how much willpower, how much are you thinking about, fuck, I got to go to the gym this afternoon. Oh, fuck, I really don't want to go to the gym. How much willpower are you burning through in the day?
Oh, 0.
0.
Yeah, 0.
Contrast that against somebody that wants to go to the gym in the afternoon and they wake up and they think, I promised my personal trainer I was going to go to the gym today. I got to pack my gym bag.
Yeah.
They go into the office or they go wherever and they're thinking about going to the gym this afternoon, and then they might eat a bit more over lunch because they're kind of preparing for the gym, and then in the afternoon they go to the gym. They've taken the same action as you. It's just that they burn through so much emotional energy. They burn through so much willpower all day, not doing the action, just ruminating over it, to complete the same action as you that took you 0 willpower. And so the more we can train our mind and our body to lean into what's difficult, and the more we can train our mind and our body to lean into just what needs to be done, the less willpower it takes. And so you get this kind of counterintuitive cycle where you find yourself doing challenging things but finding it easy. Whereas most people are doing easy things and finding it challenging.
From a switching gears a little bit, just like into a skill set perspective, because you spoke a little bit about like you're not like money driven, like you know that money's important, but it's not like the driver of a lot of the things that you do. First things first, what would you say is the main like driver for you, just to understand that?
It's a really good question, man. I think historically it's always been, it always starts off as ego, and then I think it transformed into impact. And it probably still today is impact. It's just that I define it a little bit differently because the number one people I want to have impact on is my family.
Okay.
But, you know, I'm obviously in a position where I'm able to do that these days. And so I'm impact driven, but I probably prioritize it differently than I used to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Right. And then on a skill set perspective, which skills would you say, like broadly speaking, for most founders or most entrepreneurs would be like critical for their like success in business? Are there a handful of things that you would attribute to?
It was Henry Ford that said, thinking is the hardest thing we can do, and that's why so few people do it. And so I think the number one skill of the entrepreneur is to think constructively. I think the second skill of a good entrepreneur is effective and accurate decision making. And then if you go into like tactical, practical skills, like in a business, it's really customer acquisition, which it depends on what business you're in will translate to different skills. And so if you're an ecom business, what does acquisition look like? It looks like, how do I develop really effective organic content that cuts through, causes people to stop, causes people to engage? How good am I at creating ads that cut through, and how good am I at producing traffic in a way that is profitable relative, CAC relative to LTV. And again, in an ecom business, how good am I at optimizing landing pages from a conversion rate optimization perspective to increase my conversions, or leading a team that can do that eventually? Once somebody buys, how good am I at then either upselling, cross-selling, or getting them to engage in our ecosystem more broadly? Like, I want them to follow us on social media so that we remain front of mind, so that they buy again from us next week. And then from there, it's how do I extend LTV of that particular customer? And so I'd say those are the three main skills. Number one is thinking, number two is decision making, and number three is customer acquisition.
Are there some skills that you've had to like learn exceptionally through, like maybe like the hard way for yourself in business, like things that you didn't have innately, coming up, but you were like, you've had to be, forged almost into your repertoire of skill set?
Yeah, probably everything except sales. And so communication is what kind of always came naturally to me. And coming back to, the foundational work I was doing as a kid, communication was always kind of both my gift, but also my obsession, and therefore something that, I achieved a high degree of capability on early on.
Right.
And so everything else, marketing, data, attention to detail, management and the structure around structuring a team and structuring an operating rhythm. I was always a relatively good leader, but I had to learn how to lead through hard times. And so that's like becoming more honest with oneself and the people around you, because your team aren't stupid. They know what's going on. And if you're always rosy, they'll think you're either dumb or you're lying, and they're probably right on both.
Isn't it funny that where you're like, I need to be just like super positive.
Yeah.
I need people to like just believe that everything's fine when it's not fine.
Dude, we all do it. And then it's what happens is you go, fuck, okay, I'm gonna like tell them. Like, I'm going to be like 10% honest with them. And like, you're thinking about it for 3 days and, you're like, you know, you got the conversation going up on 9 a.m. on Wednesday. And it's like the whole gym conversation we had a moment ago. And like, you're thinking about it and you're fretting about it. And you're like, oh my God, I hope they don't walk out. Oh my God, they're all going to leave. Oh my God, they're all going to hate me. They're not going to respect me anymore. Like, the world's going to end. And then you sit there and you say whatever needs to be said in order for you to be honest. And they sit there and they go, cool.
Is that it?
Exactly. And then you're like, and they're like, so what do you want us to do?
Yeah.
You know, and it's that whole shame can only exist in shadows.
Yeah.
And so we often carry so much more than we need to because we're trying to be overly positive. And then you start having hard conversations or like be more honest and transparent about the state of the business or the state of something inside of the business. And they're cool with it. That's like their response, I interpret, is literally like, Jack, this is what you pay us to do. What can we do from here?
Exactly, yeah. And I feel like it helps so much with like their maturity, you know.
Exactly, man.
Up. And then some of them may split, you know, but it's like, hey, you were never there in the first place. Dude, as well.
100%. That maturity thing is a really good point. And now that I think into it, it might not even be their level of maturity. It's more a reflection of your level of maturity of not giving them any level of awareness. And so, but what you just said points to a really important point, which is when you're overly positive with your team, they're floating around with their head in the clouds because they don't understand either the unit economics or the situation that exists in the business right now. And so you interpret that as they're immature or they're naive, whereas actually I'm the problem because I haven't communicated it to them thoroughly enough. And then my experience is I've never had anyone leave as a result of being more honest. I've never had anyone even blink their fucking eyes at the result of being honest. And in 2016, man, like the honesty was enough to scare anybody. But my team, you know, what remained of them, because we went from 90 people to 40 people, they would sit there, even the 50 people that we had to let go. I mean, they were all so incredibly compassionate and complimentary and grateful for the opportunity. And if anything, that's what made me more sad than anything else. Is we'd have a redundancy conversation. They'd sit there and they'd turn to me and they'd go, "Thank you for everything," and I'd be like, "Oh fuck."
Yeah, and so I wish I could keep you.
Exactly, and I'm so sorry, you know, that we're in this position. And so it's such a good point, man. Is that our team are often so much more mature than what our communication gives them credit for. And then our lack of communication will often make them seem immature, whereas really it's up to us to give them a more honest and realistic picture of what's going on.
Dude, I think that is like such a huge point for leaders, managers, anyone who's in that point. That like I've had so many challenges myself where like whether you're, you know, letting go of a bunch of people or you're trying to present certain things to people that you're like, oh, hopefully like they just will kind of be okay with that amount of the truth, not the whole truth.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And the thing is, man, they're not dumb. You know, like they know. Yeah. They know. Yeah. A really good book around this is The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Dude, I've been like rereading this book for like the last 3 months, and I've got all of my leaders in it. I'm like this book and like Andy Grove's High Output Management. Yeah. Those two, I'm just like, that's my entire like list at the moment, just circulating through those things. That story, like I keep reading, chills every single time I'm reading it. Take the company public when you're about to run out of cash. I know. Berserk.
Dude. Yeah. That book was a large part of the reason I was able to navigate 2016. I can
fully see why.
First time I'd read it. Immature leaders, actually, let me reframe that. When I was an immature leader, I used to lead way too positively, kind of treating the team like a bunch of 3-year-olds that just needed more confidence.
Yeah, you can do it, Sally. You can do it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, just cheering Sally on. Whereas and this comes back to your last question, which is like, where have I developed? What I've since learned is that A players and even B players will usually have a pretty accurate view and understanding of what's going on in the business and will be motivated more by challenge than, come on, Sally, you can do it. And so today, what I attempt to do is, vision's incredibly important, where we're going. The progress and the momentum and where we're succeeding is incredibly important.
Got it.
And equally as important are going, these are the constraints, these are where we're not living up to our best self, this is where we're not performing at the level that we need to, and this is exactly what I think we need to address it. What do you think?
Got it.
And so I'm trying to give that holistic picture. And what I find is that particularly with A players, it's usually the negative, the stuff that I would have thought negative, the challenging stuff that actually provides more impetus than the come on sallies.
I think they've done studies on that where it's like especially like A players, so to speak, where it's like they want more so to be told that they can't do it. It's like they want to be like, grab their head and put it in the dirt and be like, is that it? Are you trying? As opposed to like, go, you can do it. I'm here for you. I'm supporting you. It's like,
100%.
no. I want to be like,
challenged.
Is it LeBron James or one of those? But he always used to do it to his team. Like, you suck, ripping them to pieces.
Yeah.
So they'd be like, F you, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
You know, it's so powerful.
It's so powerful. And we rob our team of that opportunity when we're being overly positive, which to my observation, the vast majority of business owners and leaders do.
I had a client of mine, and it was interesting. We had this conversation about like his team, and so we were going through this document that he created, and he was like, "I want to make sure that all of my team are happy," and I was like, "I think that's a really horrible thing to optimize for. Like, if you as the leader are like trying to support their happiness, it's like." Really?
Yeah.
They should be happy when the business is productive and it's working efficiently towards the goal.
Yes.
You know, as opposed to like you needing to buy them sandwiches and, you know, go on an excursion and be like, yay, everyone's good. It's like, let's get the business working, especially when you're bootstrapped and you're cash funded your own company. So you don't have massive amounts of cash to sit there and just be like, whoa, let's just take our time. It's like, we need to get the job done.
100%. Yeah. Optimize for productivity, not happiness.
Yeah.
Because when a team of A players is productive, they will be successful, and that's what will bring fulfillment and happiness, not buying them sandwiches. Here's the thing, man. There's and you made a really good point on the end of that, which is like it's a bootstrap founder-led company. A lot of thinking around business and business literature and approach to business comes out of corporations.
So true.
And corporations are perhaps the worst. Corporations would be a demonstration of business at its worst when it couldn't be done any worse.
Yeah.
And so it's really dangerous to look at what happens in corporate Australia or corporate America and try and apply that to small to medium-sized business, because you literally need to do the exact opposite of as to what, you know, mid-level managers do in a corporation.
So true.
If you look at Musk in Tesla, SpaceX, Starlink, Neuralink, his operating model and his management and leadership style is the exact opposite of what is preached in MBAs, management schools, and in corporations. It's the exact opposite, and no one can catch him.
What would you like? Let's say right now, if you were to have all of the skills and the knowledge and the experience, and maybe we'll give you like $100,000 or something. And all the businesses and obligations that you have at the moment went away. What would you do? Would you do things differently? Would you start a different venture? Would you play in a different arena? How would you kind of like almost like restart, but still with some of this, with same skills and a little bit of resources?
Part of the equation with me is what I'm doing. I think I'm wired to do, and so if you took out like the internal wiring and just asking the question from a commercial basis, I would start an ecom company that had very strong unit economics from cost of customer acquisition to lifetime value.
Maybe I can help with that.
Yeah, we should we'll join forces.
I want to kind of like move in direction as we wrap up here. So I've observed this tendency, and this is an observation of self. So I'm kind of like, well, most people probably do it as well. But it's like, it's almost like a mindset or a way of operating that supposes that problems that you're facing will kind of almost like take care of themselves. Almost, and it's almost like it's almost like I'm in business, but I'm doing it from a distance. Does that make sense? Like I'm in the game, but I'm kind of like somewhat in the game. Like it's not fully gripping it. It's like selectively. I'm
distancing
Does
myself.
That make sense? You know what I mean? It's like I'll kind of engage, not fully engage. You know, have you seen like that overall in terms of like founders?
Yeah, and the question in that instance is, what are you protecting yourself from? What's the fear?
Yeah. Something that's just like I'm afraid of, for example, that puts me in a position where I don't want to fully engage, really.
What's the fear that will happen if you fully engage?
Yeah. I think it was a big blocker for me, like for a number of years, and I've since just like gone all in, just gripped it as if it's part of my DNA. You know what I mean? It's just becoming into the fibers of my body. And
so what you just said is really interesting in that it's become your DNA. We spoke before about upper limit problem. We spoke about you want your the upper limit to become the new normal.
Yeah.
That's another way of saying you want your previous upper limit to become your new identity.
Yeah.
And so it's not something that you did. It's not something that you fluked. It's not something that was a one-off. It's who you are. And so when you can get to a point where you see your old upper limit as your current identity, that's a really strong sign that you're up-leveling in the most fundamental way possible.
What would you say, let's say if someone was listening and they're observing, like, I guess the way you communicate your skill sets, the beliefs you had, if you were to like capture one like fundamental belief that Jack has, and you were to kind of like install that into somebody that would give them the most benefit? Like, because like fundamentally, it's like if you think a certain way, it's going to form your actions, and you'll start to behave differently.
It's like if all of my beliefs and principles were kind of this like inverse pyramid, and they all rested upon one thing, I think that one thing is cause and effect, which is to say that most people live at effect. They're at the effect of the mood they woke up in. They're at the effect of their partner. They're at the effect of the government. They're at the effect of what's going on in their business. And it's this trained and learned helplessness, and it's an addiction to victimhood. And there are parts of our culture today that actually celebrate and encourage that. A lot of the woke stuff. It's almost like the bigger victim I am, the more you should listen to me, and the more virtue I hold. And it's really just unearned virtue because it's an addiction to victimhood. And so what I try and do is live from a position of cause, which is a belief that says I am causing everything that is going on in my life and in my world, both externally and internally. And so if I'm feeling a certain way, I have cause over that. I can change it.
Right.
If it's coming from a place of deep trauma, it might take me 6 or 12 months of hard inner work in order to get to a point where that's no longer a trigger. I don't think sometimes it's not as simple as going like, feel happy now. Yeah. Sometimes being at cause requires you to take a longer term view of your own emotional well-being. Same is true in business. Whenever anything happens that I see as a challenge, the question I always ask myself is, what did I do or not do to cause that to occur? Because it's either something that I did or something I should have done but didn't that allowed that to happen. And what we don't allow, what we allow, we choose. And so you're the same. You come from a position in, as far as I can see, every area of your life, particularly business and fitness, and how strong your relationship is. You cannot achieve that level of excellence, particularly across multiple fields, unless you're coming from cause. Yeah. And I can prove this to everybody listening right now. If you think about an area of your life that you're really happy with, whether that's fitness, whether that's knowledge around a particular field, whether it's business, money, relationships, family, think of an area where you're really happy with your results. Yeah. That is an area that you are currently assuming you are at cause. And that's why you're happy with the state of that area of your life. Got it. Now, if we do the inverse, if you imagine an area that you're not happy with in your life and think into what are the beliefs I have around that area of my life, how do I feel when I think about that area of my life, that is an area right now that you are at effect. Yeah. And so any good therapy does, all any good coaching does, and that goes for self-therapy and self-coaching, is moves somebody from effect to cause, meaning you're in control, you're creating it. How do we develop a path to create it the way you want it? I
think I've read a study where they called it like internal or external locus of control.
100%.
Yeah, and there was a really interesting kind of like element of it where they referenced even individuals with like really strong religious beliefs.
Yeah.
They can kind of almost opt for this like external locus of control because they believe that everything is predetermined. I have no choice and agency over the path. It's all decided for me. And so they don't do anything in terms of acting towards like making changes or moving with any form of ambition. It's just like, it's sorted.
100%.
Which can actually do a lot more depression because you just don't even try almost.
100%.
Very interesting.
And it's super interesting to observe because it comes back to the emotional payoff we were talking about before. If there's an area of my life that I'm not happy with and it's somebody else's fault, well, I almost get an emotional boost out of that. There's an emotional satisfaction in that. I've taken something that's negative, but I'm feeling good about it because I'm able to point the finger at someone or something else.
Yeah.
However, that medium to long term, that leads to terrible outcomes because you don't adopt any agency over your own life. Whereas if you go, okay, this area of my life isn't the way that I want to, how could I have caused it to be that way? Well, there's going to be some emotional uncomfortability around wrestling with that for 10 minutes, an hour, a couple of days, a couple of months, whatever it is, however long that piece of work takes you to do. But the medium to long-term outcomes of that are going to be significantly better because you've now identified the agency that you have in that realm of your life to change it and improve it. And then what's going to happen is it's going to improve. And so I'd much rather assume that I'm responsible for everything than I'm a victim of everything.
Yeah, I love that. Very, very, very well said. I want to ask a similar question to the one that I asked, 5 years ago to you. So let's say, for example, hypothetically speaking, I'm at the stage of business that I am now, which we shared earlier. What do you think would be some of the potential problems, issues and challenges that I am likely facing or likely will face in the future?
So your next layer of growth, let's say it's from 15 to 100 million, is going to be all about A players in your leadership and management teams. Because to go from 15 to 100, you need to be working through others. Yeah. And in order to continue to build an A team, your best hires will hire your best hires. Yeah. And so it's going to be about up-leveling the leaders and managers you have in your organization. And that's going to come from one of two things. Either your current managers and leaders are going to grow with you. Some of them won't. Yeah. And when those that don't, going out and purposefully headhunting the best in the world and paying about 4 times as much as you have historically paid for managers and leaders. Because the difference between having an executive on, let's say, fully costed, bonuses, commissions, all the rest of it, on, let's say, $500K a year, relative to $200K a year, the difference isn't in their performance, their productivity, and their impact on your business. The difference isn't 2.5 times. Yeah. The difference is 100 times because you've now got an A player and somebody that's hopefully one of the best in the world at what they do. And then what they're going to do is they're going to recruit other A players because they're able to do so because they're setting the standard. And so it's going to be about that. And then I'm almost reluctant to say this because so many people use it as an excuse when it's not, but getting to 100 is you need to be very clear on total addressable market. And the reason why I say I'm reluctant to say that is I often chat to people and, they're doing a couple of $1 million and they're like, oh, I'm peaking.
It's my market big enough.
It's the market. We plateaued at 2 million because of the market. I'm like, dude, it's like a $6 billion market. Like, right. You don't have a market size problem. Yeah. But to get when going to 100, TAM is to total addressable market is important. But you're already looking at going to the States and things like that, and so I think that solves that problem.
Is there a and I think this is a really good question because I've had this, I've experienced this a few times, and I think also founders may also experience this. So, say for example, I'm bringing someone into the company and hiring them for a marketing role function, for example. Yeah. And is there a stage or a tier that you might kind of recommend ahead of where I am right now? Because like, say for example, and this is for anyone, say I'm doing $1 million a year, probably wouldn't make sense for me to be like, oh, I'm going to go and get a CMO.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Or like I'm doing 10 million, I'm going to go and get some like full executive, right? So it's like, what's the staging?
Yes, that's a really important point because, and I did this when I was a lot younger, like pre-2016 as well, is sometimes it's just as easy to overhire as it is to underhire.
Like more doesn't mean better, really, in that context.
More will actually mean worse if they're used to playing a game that isn't the game that you're playing right now. And so 10 million is a really good example, right? So let's say you're doing 10, you go and recruit the COO of a comparable company that's doing 400 million. That person's going to come in. They're used to an ivory tower.
Yeah.
They're used to teams that are huge. They're used to middle management. They're used to all of these things. At 10, they still need to get their hands dirty. Yes, they need to be strategic. They need to be able to lead. They need to be able to set direction. They need to be able to set vision, all the high level stuff. But they also need to be able to come down to the practical, tactical. If you pulled them out of somewhere doing 400, they might not have that. Yeah. And so you've overhired, and in doing so, really kind of compromised the growth of the business. And so it's less common than the underhiring. Generally speaking, people underhire because they're trying to save money.
Agreed.
But it's definitely, I made it. I'm sure you've probably made it.
Yeah.
So that's important as well. You really want to hire for the stage that you're at. Now, how do we quantify that to make it really useful? You know, if you're doing 10 and the goal is to get to 50 over the next couple of years, what I would, again, there's some sort of subjectivity and some nuance to this, right? But I would probably look for somebody that is coming from a business that was doing 20 or 30.
Yeah.
The business was on the up and the executive is on the up. So they're marginally ahead of where we are currently.
20 points, 30 points kind of thing, somewhere in that range. Yeah.
And they're on the up.
Yes.
Because you can, when you start hiring senior people, sometimes you can find people that feel like they've kind of demonstrated everything they need to do in their career.
Right.
And they're hanging their hat on previous accomplishments and they're kind of like on the down.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like I'm not prepared to go and get down into it again. It's almost like...
And the fire's not burning as bright as it once did. And so you want people from companies that are on the up and individuals that are on the up. The other thing that's really, really important about this is, you know, when you get to, let's say... I don't know, maybe 5 mil plus, but particularly 10 or 20. Most people put out job ads and try and kind of recruit people reactively.
Yeah.
The problem with that is the only people looking at job ads are people that don't have jobs.
Yeah.
Right? And so in any role that has any level of seniority, you have to go and headhunt. Putting up a job ad and sifting through resumes for a leader in your business is absolutely not acceptable.
Yeah.
Because you're by definition, just by that one shift, you're going to be attracting C players that are looking for jobs.
Yeah.
You don't want C players looking for jobs. You want people that are hard to acquire, that are driving results, that you're going to need to pay over market rate.
Absolutely.
And you want to go and inspire them to contribute to your vision.
Crowbar them out of their current position. You're coming with me, son.
Exactly. Yeah, if you don't have to do that, there's a problem. Yeah. Like if they come to you easy, there's a problem.
Yeah. Dude, I think this is tremendously valuable. Your mindset, your perspective, the wisdom that you share on these key points with such detail. You know, I'm particularly excited to have another conversation in 5 odd years.
Yeah, definitely.
See what's unfolded then. Very, very, very helpful. Where is the best place for people to spend time with you online or learn more from you and get in touch with you?
Just Instagram, man. I'm on Instagram pretty much every day. So just Jack Delosa, Delosa. That's where I'm documenting the journeys.
Nice. Fantastic. I appreciate you again.
I appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, brother.
Keep doing what you're doing. Thanks, man.
Thanks a lot.